Okay, imagine this. What if you had like a secret key, a kind of hidden code that could unlock basically anything you wanted? You know, maybe a lucky break or that big career move you've been hoping for. This idea that our thoughts actually have this magnetic power, it's really captivating, isn't it?
It really is.
That's pretty much the core of the law of attraction. But the question is it like a real thing, a genuine principle shaping reality? Or is it more just wishful thinking, maybe dressed up nicely?
That's exactly the big question we're tackling today. We've looked at, well, a whole bunch of different sources to try and get a handle on the law of attraction from all sorts of angles.
Okay.
So we'll dig into its basic ideas, where it actually came from, you know, its history, how people try to put it into practice, and definitely we have to look at the arguments for it, but also the criticisms against it.
So a full picture.
Exactly. The mission here is to really unpack this whole philosophy, see what makes it tick.
All right, let's dive in then. What's the absolute fundamental idea? The bedrock of the law of attraction.
Okay, so at its very core, the law of attraction, or LOA, suggests there's this really direct, powerful link between what goes on in your head, your thoughts, and what happens in your life. The main belief is actually pretty simple. You focus on positive stuff, good thoughts, you attract good outcomes, you dwell on the negative. Well, you draw in negative results.
And that applies across the board.
Supposedly, yes. Not just, you know, feelings, but everything. Health, money, relationships, the whole deal. The idea underpinning it all is that your thoughts are basically energy.
Energy.
Yeah, a form of energy. And that energy attracts similar energy back to you. So your thoughts literally pull corresponding experiences into your life. That's the claim.
Wow. Okay, that sounds incredibly empowering. The idea that we can have that kind of control just by changing how we think.
Exactly. And that promise of, you know, personal agency, that's a huge part why it's so appealing.
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, in a world that often feels chaotic or out of our control, LOA offers this seemingly straightforward path to getting what you want. Just use your mind power. It puts you in the driver's seat, suggesting you can steer your life just by managing your thoughts.
But there's always a but, right? If thinking positive brings good things, what happens when things go wrong? What's the flip side?
You hit it right there. That's the tricky implication. If the logic holds, then negative stuff that happens, setbacks, disappointments, things not working out well, they could be traced back to your own negative thinking. Or your vibrational frequency, as some people call it.
Oof.
Yeah. So while the focus is usually on the positive, you can create your reality side, this other side can kind of unintentionally lead to blaming yourself when life throws curveballs. And that's a really significant criticism people have.
Okay, so this core idea, like attracts like.
Yeah.
How is that supposed to actually work, according to LOA people?
Right. So that's a foundational principle. It basically says similar energies, similar thoughts, they're drawn together like magnets. So if you cultivate a positive mental state, you're believed to attract positive situations, positive people. Negativity, on the other hand, is thought to pull in negative experiences.
Okay.
And they even apply this to relationships, which, interestingly, lines up a bit with a psychological concept called homophily.
Yeah.
You know, the tendency for people to hang out with others who are similar to them.
Huh. Interesting connection. Are there other sort of main rules or principles?
Yeah, definitely. Another big one is the idea that nature abhors a vacuum.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
It suggests that, well, any empty space tends to get filled up naturally, whether that's physical space or, more importantly here, mental space.
Right.
So in LOA terms, this means you need to actively clear out the negative stuff, negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, maybe even negative people or influences in your life. That creates a void.
Well, yeah.
And then, according to the principle, that void will get filled. So the advice is be intentional about it. Consciously fill that space with positive thoughts, positive intentions, making room for good things to flow in.
That kind of makes intuitive sense. Like decluttering your mind to make space for better things.
Exactly. Clear out the junk, make way for the good stuff.
Okay, what else? Any other core ideas?
The third key principle is this concept that the present is always perfect.
Perfect. How so?
Well, it's not perfect in the sense that everything is exactly how you want it, but perfect in that it's the only place you have power. It encourages focusing on this moment right now, finding ways to improve things now, appreciating what you do have now, instead of getting stuck regretting the past or worrying about the future.
Okay, that sounds familiar. Like mindfulness.
You got it. There's a very strong connection there.
Yeah.
While LOA puts it in this metaphysical frame, you know, directing energy and stuff, the focus on the present moment absolutely resonates with mindfulness and acceptance principles.
So even if you're skeptical about the attraction part.
Right. Even if you set aside the specific low-A claims, focusing on the present, appreciating what you have, taking positive steps now, these are things supported by psychology. Like we said, like attracts, like mirrors homophily in relationships. Nature abhors a vacuum, kind of relates to changing habits, replacing bad ones with good ones. And yeah, the present is perfect aligns strongly with mindfulness and ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy.
So that psychological overlap might be why some people feel it works for them.
It very likely contributes, yeah. It taps into psychological mechanisms that do have real effects, regardless of whether thoughts are literally attracting things like magnets.
Fascinating how it all weaves together. Okay, so this whole law of attraction thing, it didn't just pop up with The Secret, did it? I feel like I've heard about it before that. It must have a history.
Oh, absolutely, you're right. Its roots go way back, firmly planted in the 19th century, actually.
Really? 19th century?
Yep. With something called the New Thought movement, primarily in the U.S., it was this big philosophical, kind of spiritual movement that really emphasized the power of the mind to shape your reality.
Okay, so who were the key players back then?
Well, a name that often comes up as a major influence is Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. He had some personal healing experiences that led him to develop theories about the mind-body connection. His ideas are collected in the Quimby manuscript. Then you had others like Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, and Emma Curtis Hopkins. But Prentice Mulford is a really key figure for Loa specifically.
Mulford.
Yeah, Prentice Mulford. He was one of the first to really spell out the law of attraction as this general principle, not just for healing, but for everything in life. He wrote essays called The Law of Success back in the late 1880s.
Wow, okay, so it started broader than just health.
Exactly. These early New Thought thinkers really expanded the focus from just, spiritual healing to cover success, happiness, general well-being, the whole package.
So how did that carry forward into the 20th century?
Well, the ideas kept developing and getting more popular. Early 20th century, you see figures like William Walker Atkinson. In 1906, he wrote Thought Vibration, or The Law of Attraction in the Thought World.
Catchy title.
Huh? Yeah. He explicitly called it the law of attraction and positioned it as this, fundamental law of the universe. Really stressed how focusing your thoughts, whether on desires or fears, has a powerful impact.
Fears too, huh?
Yeah, the idea being you attract whatever you give your dominant attention to. Then, in 1910, Wallace D. Wattles published The Science of Getting Rich.
Ah, I've heard of that one.
Right. It focused specifically on using these principles to get wealthy, overcoming mental blocks to abundance. And that book, years later, was a major inspiration for Rhonda Byrne and The Secret.
Okay, makes sense.
And then, of course, you can't talk about this era without mentioning Napoleon Hill. His book, Think and Grow Rich, from 1937 was huge.
Legendary book.
Absolutely. It was based on his studies of supposedly successful people, and it really popularized the idea that focused thought, intense belief, that's the key to attracting what you want.
So it sounds like back then there was a really strong emphasis on, material success.
Yeah.
Getting rich.
Definitely. Yeah, that focus on wealth was pretty prominent. It fit with the sort of cultural aspirations of the time, the American dream narrative. And what these writers also did was start to kind of systematize the ideas, turn the philosophy into more concrete steps, actionable methods, making it something you could seemingly learn and apply.
Right. Less abstract, more like a how-to.
Exactly.
And then, boom, Secret. That just blew everything wide open, didn't it?
Yeah.
Brought Loa into, hyper-mainstream awareness.
Totally. Rhonda Byrne's film in 2006, and then the book, it was a global phenomenon. She really packaged it brilliantly. Drew on Wattles, like we said, but presented Loa as this powerful, almost mystical secret that had been hidden, but now anyone could use it to get, anything.
The core message was still that like attracts like.
Pretty much, yeah. That thoughts and feelings create these magnetic frequencies, she called them, and they draw back experiences on the same frequency.
And she had that simple formula, right? The ask, believe, receive thing.
Yep, that was central. The famous 3 steps. First, ask. Be super clear about what you want. Second, believe. Have absolute faith you'll get it. Act as if it's already yours.
Right.
And third, receive. Be open, ready to let it come into your life. She even connected it to Bible verses to give it more weight.
And the film had all those talking heads, the different teachers.
Yeah, it featured a bunch of contemporary authors. His endorsement, that was massive. Huge boost to its reach.
The Secret. even the title felt like you were being let in on something big.
Exactly. The title itself was genius marketing. Made it sound like you were getting access to this powerful hidden knowledge. Plus, starting with a movie, very visual, and simplifying the message. It made it super accessible.
But maybe too simple.
Well, that was the criticism, wasn't it? That it oversimplified things, potentially set up unrealistic expectations. But you can't deny its impact. It absolutely reignited widespread interest in the law of attraction for a whole new generation.
Okay, so if someone wants to actually do this stuff, apply the law of attraction.
Yeah.
What are the typical techniques? The how-to part.
Right. Well, one of the absolute cornerstones is visualization.
Picturing things in your mind.
Exactly, but really vividly. Creating detailed mental movies of what you want, but crucially, as if it's already happened. You're meant to engage all your senses, really feel the emotions of having achieved it.
So not just seeing it, but feeling it.
Feeling it is key, according to proponents. Techniques like imagining your perfect day in detail, or the cinema technique, watching your goal unfold on a mental movie screen, are common. The idea is to solidify your belief, get emotionally invested, which supposedly raises your vibration and helps reprogram your subconscious.
Okay, mental rehearsals, got it. What about affirmations? I hear that word a lot.
Affirmations, yeah. Those are positive statements, always phrased in the present tense, that you repeat to yourself over and over.
Like, I'm wealthy, instead of, I want to be wealthy.
Precisely. I am successful. I am healthy. I am attracting love. The goal is to basically rewrite the script in your subconscious mind. Replace the negative self-talk, the limiting beliefs, with these new empowering ones. Consistency is seen as really important here.
So it's about changing your inner dialogue.
Essentially, yes. Shifting your self-identity at a deep level. It's interesting, there are some parallels there with cognitive restructuring techniques used in things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Huh, okay. And gratitude, that seems to come up a lot too.
Oh, massively. Gratitude is often positioned as, like, the key to unlocking abundance.
How so?
The thinking is, by consciously focusing on and appreciating what you already have, you shift your focus away from lack what you don't have and towards a feeling of abundance.
Right, focusing on the positive that's already there.
Exactly. And that shift in focus, that feeling of appreciation, is believed to, again, raise your vibration and signal to the universe, so to speak, that you're ready and open to receive more good things.
So things like gratitude journals.
Yeah, gratitude journals are a very common practice. Writing down things you're thankful for, and again, really feeling the gratitude. It's not just listing things. And what's interesting here is, even completely outside of LOA, positive psychology research consistently shows that practicing gratitude really does have tangible benefits.
Yeah.
Better mood, more optimism, improved well-being.
So that part actually has some science behind it, even if not the attraction mechanism itself.
Correct. The psychological benefits of gratitude are pretty well documented.
Okay, what about like physical tools, vision boards? I see those everywhere.
Vision boards are definitely popular. They're basically collages, physical or digital, filled with images, words, symbols that represent your goals and desires.
Like pictures of a dream house or a travel destination.
Exactly, stuff like that. They act as constant visual reminders, keeping your goals top of mind, reinforcing what you're supposedly attracting.
So it keeps you focused.
That's the idea. Other tools might be things like a future box, where you put items symbolizing your goals, or these repetitive writing methods you sometimes see online, like the 369 method or 777 method.
Right, writing affirmations a certain number of times.
Yeah. All these tools basically aim to make your desires feel more concrete, maintain your focus, reinforce your commitment, and maybe even act as little personal rituals to strengthen belief.
Interesting mix of mental and like tangible stuff. Okay, we've mentioned a few names already, but who are the really big figures, the sort of faces of the modern LOA movement?
Well, Rhonda Byrne obviously is huge because of The Secret.
Right.
Her core message, like we said, is thoughts and feelings are energy, like attracts like, the ask, believe, receive process. And she really pushed the importance of feeling good, feeling the emotions of having what you want, plus that whole branding of it as secret knowledge.
Right. And then there's Abraham Hicks. That sounds different.
It is a bit different. That's Esther Hicks channeling, supposedly, a group of non-physical entities called Abraham. Her late husband, Jerry, was also involved. Their message is also fundamentally like, attracts like, but they put a huge emphasis on your emotions as a guidance system.
Emotional guidance system.
Yeah. Good feelings mean you're aligned with your desires, on the right track. Bad feelings mean you're out of alignment. They teach something called deliberate creation, using focused thought, visualization, but always checking in with your emotions to make sure you feel good while doing it. The whole channeling aspect is unique, of course.
Okay. And Bob Proctor, he was in Secret too.
He was. Bob Proctor was teaching personal development stuff for ages before the movie. He talks a lot about the law of vibration. Similar idea. Everything vibrates. Similar vibrations attract.
Vibration again.
Yeah, it's a common theme. He often describes things moving from a spiritual plane, thoughts, to an intellectual plane, ideas, to the physical plane, results. Yeah. He talks about setting C-type goals, really big, ambitious goals, and emphasizes acting as if, behaving like the person you want to become now.
Fake it till you make it, kind of?
Sort of, but more about embodying the identity. He also really stresses changing your underlying subconscious beliefs, what he calls paradigms. His sequence is often thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Notice actions in there.
Okay. And Jack Canfield, the chicken soup for the soul guy.
Yep, him too. Also featured in The Secret, he sees LOA as maybe the most powerful law there is, always working. His take is pretty straightforward. What you focus on, give your energy and attention to, you draw more of that back.
So manage your thoughts and feelings consciously.
Exactly. Create a positive vibration. He really emphasizes personal responsibility. You're creating your reality, consciously or subconsciously. And coming from his background with all those inspirational stories, he probably helped make LOA feel more mainstream and relatable.
Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting how all these different people have kind of shaped it. And now, well, now it's all over the internet, right? Social media.
Oh, completely. The digital age has just poured gasoline on the fire. TikTok, YouTube, they're absolutely flooded with LOA content.
Like lucky girl syndrome. I've seen that hashtag.
Exactly. That's a perfect example on TikTok. People basically affirming good things will happen, acting as if they're perpetually lucky. It's pure LOA principle package for TikTok. YouTube is like a massive library explanations, how-to guides, success stories, guided meditations, channels dedicated to teachers like Neville Goddard, who's had a huge resurgence online.
So it's easier to access, but maybe diluted.
Yeah, both are true. It's democratized. Anyone can share their take. But that also means the message gets fragmented, often simplified, maybe even distorted, to fit short-form video or catchy content. You also get these relatable micro-influencers sharing their personal manifestation journeys, which really appeals to people.
Okay, so we've covered what it is, the history, the techniques, the main players. But what about the science? Or lack thereof? What does the scientific community actually say?
Well, from the perspective of mainstream science, the verdict is pretty unanimous. There's no solid empirical evidence to back up the core claims of the law of attraction. It's generally classified as pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, okay.
Yeah. Proponents sometimes try to link it to concepts in modern physics, like quantum mechanics, but physicists overwhelmingly reject those connections. They see it as a misunderstanding, a misapplication of complex science, sometimes called quantum mysticism or quantum woo.
So scientists aren't buying the physics analogies.
Not at all. A big problem from a scientific standpoint is that the claims are often vague and unfalsifiable. You can't really design an experiment to definitively prove or disprove that thoughts create reality in the way LOA describes.
So what is the evidence based on then? Mostly stories.
Largely, yes. It relies heavily on anecdotes, personal testimonials, and those are really vulnerable to cognitive biases. Confirmation bias is a huge one.
Right. Seeing what you want to see.
Exactly. You focus on the times it seemed to work and conveniently forget or explain away the times it didn't. Mark Manson, the author, called LOA basically a candied-up version of confirmation bias. There's also selection bias. People are much more likely to shout about their successes than their failures. And interestingly, some actual research has found correlations between strong belief in manifestation and things like taking bigger financial risks, sometimes even leading to bankruptcy.
Ouch. Okay, so if it's not a universal law, why do some people feel so strongly that it works for them? Are there psychological explanations?
Oh, absolutely. Psychology offers several potential explanations. Confirmation bias, like we just mentioned. Another big one is the self-fulfilling prophecy.
How does that work?
Basically, if you strongly expect something to happen, you might unconsciously change your behavior in ways that make it more likely to happen. If you expect a job interview to go well because you've been visualizing success, you might project more confidence, prepare better, and actually perform better.
So your belief influences your actions.
Precisely. Then there's the placebo effect. Just believing something will help you can sometimes lead to real, measurable improvements, especially with subjective things like pain or mood. And critically, many LOA practices overlap with established psychological principles. positive thinking, setting clear goals, visualization. These are techniques used in positive psychology and performance coaching because they do have benefits, like increasing motivation, resilience, and focus. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory suggests positive emotions broaden our mindset and help build resources.
So LOA might just be accidentally packaging effective psychological techniques.
That's a very plausible explanation. People might be experiencing the benefits of goal setting, optimism, and increased motivation, but attributing it to the mystical law rather than the psychological mechanisms and their own subsequent actions.
It really sounds like the actions people take because of the belief might be the real driver, not just the thoughts alone.
That's a really key point. The behavioral changes, trying harder, noticing opportunities, acting more confident that often follow adopting an LOA mindset are likely far more influential on outcomes than the thoughts themselves just floating out into the universe.
Okay, we've hit the science, the psychology. What about the downsides? The potential negative consequences? You mentioned victim blaming earlier.
Yes, that's a major ethical concern. If you truly believe your thoughts create everything, then when bad things happen, illness, accidents, poverty, even, some critics point out, horrific events like the Holocaust, the implication is that the victims somehow attracted it through their own negative thinking.
That's really problematic.
Extremely. It can lead to a serious lack of compassion, both for others and for yourself. It can also foster what's called toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah, the idea that you must be positive all the time, that negative emotions are bad and should be suppressed. That's not healthy. We need to process negative feelings. Another risk is inaction, believing that just thinking or visualizing is enough, so you don't take the necessary practical steps towards your goals.
Just wait for the universe to deliver.
Kind of, yeah. And when things don't manifest, that can lead to serious hits to self-esteem, guilt, shame, feeling like you failed, like you weren't good enough, didn't believe hard enough.
I can see how that could spiral.
Definitely. There's also the risk of exploitation, people selling expensive courses or coaching, preying on vulnerable individuals desperate for change. And a broader criticism is that LOA puts all the focus on the individual's thoughts, ignoring real-world systemic issues, inequality, discrimination, lack of opportunity that significantly impact people's lives.
So it kind of ignores the bigger picture.
It can, yes. The ethical weight of your thoughts create your reality is heavy. It can also be dangerous if it leads people to delay or avoid seeking evidence-based help, like therapy for depression or financial counseling for debt, thinking they can just manifest their way out of it.
It seems like that initial feeling of control could backfire badly if things don't work out.
Exactly. It's a paradox. The promise of ultimate control can lead to a profound loss of control and self-worth when reality doesn't match the expectation.
Okay, wow. Lots to consider there. Let's switch gears slightly. Despite the criticisms, we do hear these inspiring stories, right? People crediting LOA for amazing things.
Absolutely. There are countless anecdotes out there. Jack Canfield, we mentioned him, often tells the story of setting a goal to earn $100,000 in a year, visualizing a check, and ending the year having earned, I think it was $97,000. He attributes that directly to LOA combined with taking inspired action. You hear stories of people finding their dream homes against all odds, attracting perfect partners, recovering from illnesses, passing exams they thought they'd fail. These narratives are powerful. They offer hope. They resonate emotionally.
They're definitely compelling. But back to the critical thinking aspect.
Always important, yes. With anecdotes, you have to consider what else might have been going on. Hard work, networking, privilege, luck. These factors often get downplayed when the story is framed through an LOA lens, retrospective coherence looking back and making it all fit the narrative.
And confirmation bias again.
Exactly. Interpreting events to fit the belief. It's also worth noting, even in Canfield's story, he mentions taking aligned actions. It wasn't just thinking, there was effort involved.
Right. So what about the other side? The stories that aren't so positive? The cautionary tales?
Well, you don't hear them shouted from the rooftops as much, for obvious reasons, survivorship bias.
People don't like sharing failures.
Pretty much. But the cautionary tales often echo the criticisms we discussed. People feeling immense guilt or shame when things go wrong. People falling into debt from risky investments made while feeling overly optimistic. People neglecting practical action. The framework of LOA doesn't really have a good explanation for failure other than you did it wrong, not enough belief, wrong vibration, subconscious blocks.
Which puts the blame back on the individual.
Always. You also see low-A rhetoric used sometimes in multi-level marketing schemes where recruits are told their lack of success is due to their own negativity rather than, the often predatory structure of the business model itself.
Ah, yeah, I've heard about that connection.
And even the recent lucky girl syndrome trend, while seemingly harmless, raises concerns about ignoring privilege and setting people up for self-blame if their luck runs out. There are podcasts, like Cautionary Tales, that explore how flawed beliefs, including potentially those fueled by low-A thinking, can lead to negative outcomes. Sunk costs are also a factor. People invest so much time, energy, maybe money, that it's hard to admit it's not working, so they double down. Cognitive dissonance.
Man, it's a lot more complex than just think positive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Deeply appealing on one level, but with significant potential pitfalls and unanswered questions.
Okay, this has been a really thorough exploration.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, what are your sort of final takeaways, your reflections on this whole law of attraction phenomenon?
Well, it's undeniable that the law of attraction is captivating. It taps right into these really deep human desires, don't you think? The desire for control, for hope, for a clear path to a better life.
Totally. Who doesn't want that?
Exactly. It offers this incredibly appealing package. Empowerment, simplicity, just change your thoughts, change your life. But, as we've seen, it's vital to weigh that appeal against the lack of scientific backing and the very real potential for negative psychological consequences like self-blame or inaction.
So it's kind of like a modern belief system.
You could see it that way, yeah, like a form of modern folk psychology, maybe, or a spiritual system trying to provide meaning and a sense of agency in a complicated world. The real tension seems to be between that passive belief, just thinking and waiting, and the proactive effort that life usually requires.
Finding the balance.
Maybe that's the key, finding a balance.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most helpful way to look at it is not as a literal law of physics, but maybe as a set of tools, a visualization, positive framing, gratitude that can be psychologically supportive if they're used wisely.
Wisely meaning.
Meaning with critical thinking, understanding the psychological mechanisms likely at play, combining them with practical action and effort, and importantly, acknowledging external realities and not falling into the trap of self-blame when things don't go perfectly. It's about finding a personal approach that feels empowering but stays grounded.